Dawn of confidence and the first cracks. June 22, 1941. 3:15 a.m. near the Bug River outside Brest-Litovsk, occupied Poland. The night explodes without warning. Artillery flashes tear open the darkness, lighting low clouds from beneath. The ground shakes as if something enormous is waking up under the soil. German infantrymen of the 45th Infantry Division lie pressed into wet grass, fingers locked around rifle stocks, breath held as shells arc overhead and slam into Soviet positions across the river. The smell is sharp and metallic. Cordite, oil, churned earth. Somewhere to the east, buildings are already burning. Lieutenant Karl Weiss checks his watch by the pale glow of a shielded torch. Everything is on schedule. Weeks of planning have led to this exact minute. He has been told, clearly and repeatedly, that this campaign will be short. 6 weeks, perhaps 8. The Red Army will collapse under pressure. Roads will carry fuel forward. Trains will follow close behind. The math has already been done. At 3:30, assault boats push into the river. Engineers move fast, setting planks, laying cables, shouting clipped commands over the roar. By sunrise, German troops are across. Soviet resistance is disorganized, surprised, uneven. Prisoners stumble west with hands raised, eyes wide, still in undershirts and boots unlaced. Everything about the morning seems to confirm what the planners promised. By noon, armored columns are rolling east. Panzer III and IV tanks grind forward in long files, tracks chewing up dirt roads that were never meant to carry this weight. Dust hangs in the air, thick enough to sting the eyes. Motorcycle messengers weave between vehicles, engines screaming. Maps are unfolded on hoods. Orders are shouted. The pace is relentless, almost euphoric. Colonel General Heinz Guderian, commanding Panzer Group II, is already pushing his units harder than planned. Speed is everything. The enemy must not be allowed to recover. Fuel trucks follow close behind, canvas-covered, vulnerable, driven by men who know that if they stop, the entire column stops with them. But by the afternoon of the first day, small delays begin to appear. A bridge marked as intact on reconnaissance photos is partially destroyed. Engineers rush forward, but the detour forces vehicles onto a secondary road. That road narrows, then dissolves into ruts. A fuel truck sinks to its axles in mud softened by shellfire and summer rain. It takes 2 hours to pull it free. 2 hours does not seem like much. No one records it as a problem. Farther back, at a railhead near Warsaw, German logistics officers stare at timetables already slipping. Soviet rail gauges are wider than German ones. Trains cannot simply roll forward. Cargo must be unloaded, shifted, reloaded. Cranes are scarce. Labor units are behind schedule. The advance is faster than the rail conversion teams can move. Still, the reports from the front are glowing. Entire Soviet divisions are being encircled. Airfields are overrun with aircraft destroyed on the ground. Hitler's headquarters receives confident updates. The enemy is reeling. This is exactly how it was supposed to look. Yet the consumption numbers are quietly drifting upward. Tank units burn more fuel than planned because detours force longer routes. Trucks idle in traffic jams that stretch for kilometers. Drivers keep engines running out of fear they will not restart. Dust clogs air filters, reducing efficiency. Tires shred on broken roads. Spare parts begin to vanish from inventories. A supply officer named Major Ernst Hoffmann, stationed with a Corps support unit, notices something unsettling by the evening of June 23. Fuel deliveries that should arrive every 12 hours are slipping to 18, then 24. Ammunition is still plentiful, but the trucks carrying it are arriving nearly empty of fuel themselves. They refuel, unload, and immediately turn back west, leaving no reserve behind. He writes a brief note in his log. Marginal delays observed. No action required. At the front, infantry units push ahead without waiting for kitchens or supply wagons. They eat cold rations on the move. Water is drawn from streams without purification. Boots begin to split. Men joke about it. The Russians are running. Why slow down now? By the third day, the columns have outrun their maps. Villages appear that are not marked. Roads fork without signage. Local guides are scarce or hostile. Vehicles bunch up as officers argue over directions. Each pause burns more fuel. Each wrong turn multiplies the problem. None of this looks like failure yet. Not from the air. Not on situation maps filled with arrows pointing east. But beneath the surface of the Advance, something fragile is already straining. The campaign was designed to move faster than its own supply system could truly sustain. And with every confident kilometer gained, the distance back to fuel, food, and spare parts grows longer, thinner, and more exposed. The long road east and the quiet strain. June 29, 1941. Late afternoon. Minsk Oblast, Western Soviet Union. The sun hangs low and white in a sky smeared with dust. Heat presses down on the road like a physical weight. A column of German vehicles stretches as far as the eye can see, tanks, half-tracks, fuel trucks, horse-drawn wagons, all creeping forward in fits and starts. Engines cough. Radiators hiss. Men sit on fenders with helmets pushed back, faces dark with sweat and grime. Unteroffizier Wilhelm Kruger, a driver with the 18th Panzer Division, kills his engine for the third time in an hour. The needle on the fuel gauge trembles just above empty. He was supposed to refuel that morning. The truck arrived late. When it finally did, the hose split, spilling precious fuel into the dirt before the leak could be tied off with wire and rags. Kruger took less than half a tank and was waved forward anyway. Ahead of him, a Panzer IV sits motionless, crew clustered around the engine deck. Tools clatter. The smell of overheated oil drifts back along the line. There is no recovery vehicle nearby. It broke down yesterday and was pushed into a ditch to clear the road. The Advance has not slowed on paper. Maps in headquarters show sweeping encirclements closing with precision. Near Minsk, entire Soviet armies are being trapped. Prisoners march west in columns so long they block side roads for hours. The victories are real. But they are expensive in ways that do not show up in casualty reports. Fuel consumption is now exceeding forecasts by nearly a third. Part of it is the terrain. Roads marked as primary routes crumble under constant traffic. Asphalt breaks apart, exposing soft subsoil that turns to dust or mud depending on the weather. Vehicles detour onto farm tracks that twist and double back, adding kilometers to every movement. Part of it is the heat. Engines run hotter, burn more, fail faster. And part of it is simply distance. Each kilometer east stretches the supply chain thinner. Fuel trucks must travel farther to deliver the same amount. Each trip consumes fuel just to deliver fuel. The arithmetic is brutal, but few at the front stop long enough to calculate it. At a Corps headquarters outside Minsk, General der Infanterie Walter Heitz pores over reports as flies buzz around the map table. His staff speaks in low voices. Rail conversion units are 3 days behind schedule. Bridges over the Berzina River are damaged and require constant repair. Soviet partisans have already begun sabotaging tracks behind the lines. Heitz requests additional transport capacity. The reply is polite and vague. Resources are committed elsewhere. The advance must continue. Farther south, Panzer Group 1 pushes toward Kiev with similar confidence and similar problems. Fuel convoys are delayed by traffic jams so dense that drivers abandon vehicles to sleep on the roadside. Horse-drawn wagons, slower and fragile, fall even farther behind. Infantry units begin sharing rations between platoons because kitchens have not caught up. In the air, Luftwaffe pilots still dominate the skies, but even they begin to feel the strain. Forward airfields are primitive, hastily cleared strips of earth. Fuel arrives irregularly. Ground crews siphon gasoline from wrecked Soviet aircraft to keep German planes flying. Sortie rates drop, not from enemy action, but from empty tanks. The men notice before the commanders do. Conversations shift. Jokes about a quick march to Moscow fade. Soldiers begin asking when mail will arrive. Boots are patched with wire. Bread grows stale, then moldy. Water discipline breaks down. Dysentery appears in rear units first, then creeps forward. Major Ernst Hoffmann updates his log again. Fuel reserves at forward dumps reduced to 12 hours. Transport losses increasing due to mechanical failure. He sends a more urgent report up the chain. This one mentions risk. The response comes back stamped and brief. Maintain momentum. Enemy collapsing. And in a sense, the enemy is collapsing. Soviet units are shattered, cut off, destroyed. But the German advance is now running on a knife edge. A single missed convoy can halt an entire division. A single destroyed bridge can stall a panzer corps for a day, sometimes two. On July 1st, near the town of Borisov, the edge is tested. A fuel convoy fails to arrive overnight. No one knows why. Perhaps it took a wrong turn. Perhaps it was bombed. Perhaps it is simply stuck in traffic somewhere west. By dawn, tank crews are siphoning fuel from half-tracks. By noon, half-tracks are dry. Orders go out to halt non-essential movement. The halt lasts 6 hours. Then 12. When fuel finally arrives, it is not enough to restore full strength. The column moves again, but slower now, cautiously, as if something invisible has reached out and grabbed hold of the wheels. The campaign is still advancing. The arrows on the map still point east. But beneath the confidence, beneath the victories, the supply system is no longer keeping pace. It is reacting, improvising, barely holding together. And every hour of delay gives the Red Army time to regroup, to learn, to prepare. When speed becomes isolation. July 10, 1941. Early morning. East of Smolensk. A thin mist clings to the low ground as the first engines turn over. The sound rolls across fields already scarred by tracks and shell holes. German armor is positioned deep inside Soviet territory now, farther than many planners believed possible at this stage. The maps have been updated with pencil lines, arrows pushed forward almost daily. But the spaces behind those arrows are growing dangerously hollow. Oberleutnant Franz Adler, commanding a Panzer III platoon, stands beside his tank with a mug of ersatz coffee cooling in his hand. He counts vehicles. One is missing. It ran out of fuel during the night and was abandoned after the crew stripped what parts they could carry. 2 more are operational but nearly dry. He has been ordered to advance at first light anyway. The radio crackles with clipped transmissions. Units are reporting in not with enemy contact, but with requests. Fuel status. Spare parts. Recovery assets. The tone has changed. It is no longer about how fast they can go, but whether they can move at all. The Smolensk encirclement is forming ahead, another massive victory in the making. Soviet resistance stiffens but is disorganized. German tactics still dominate every engagement. And yet, between battles, the pauses grow longer. The roads here are worse. What passes for a highway is a ribbon of crushed stone that disintegrates under continuous traffic. Dust rises in choking clouds, coating men and machines alike. Filters clog within hours. Engines overheat, then fail. Mechanics work without sleep, cannibalizing disabled vehicles to keep others running. Each repair saves one tank and dooms another. Fuel convoys are now traveling hundreds of kilometers from the nearest railhead. Trucks break down faster than they can be repaired. Tires are bald. Axles snap. Drivers abandon vehicles when they can no longer be towed. Every abandoned truck is a permanent reduction in capacity. At Panzer Group headquarters, officers argue over priorities. Should fuel go to the leading spearheads or to the infantry divisions following behind? Should air units receive preference, or should every drop go to the tanks? There is no good answer. Giving fuel to one unit means starving another. General Guderian pushes relentlessly. He knows speed is his shield. If he slows too much, the enemy will recover. But even he cannot ignore the reports crossing his desk. Entire battalions reporting fuel levels measured in minutes rather than hours. Recon units immobilized. Flanks held by infantry on foot because motorized units cannot keep up. In one village east of Smolensk, a German company halts not because of enemy fire, but because the kitchen wagons have not arrived in 3 days. Soldiers break into a grain storehouse and grind wheat by hand. They bake rough bread in helmet liners over open fires. Discipline frays, not from fear, but from exhaustion and hunger. The Soviets begin to notice. Red Army commanders, battered but learning, start targeting what hurts most. Small units slip through forests to attack bridges and fuel dumps. A single well-placed explosion turns a vital crossing into a bottleneck for days. German security units are spread thin, guarding hundreds of kilometers of road and rail. On July 14, a fuel depot near Yartsevo goes up in flames after a partisan attack. The fire burns all night, visible for kilometers. The loss is not just fuel, but momentum. Units scheduled to advance must wait. Waiting burns more fuel. The cycle tightens. Luftwaffe support becomes sporadic. Forward airfields cannot be supplied reliably. Pilots fly fewer missions, conserving fuel for emergencies. Ground troops feel the absence immediately. Soviet aircraft, once destroyed on the ground, now begin to appear again in small numbers, probing, harassing. The sense of isolation grows at the front. Officers realize that if the Soviets cut the roads behind them, there will be no quick rescue. There are no reserves waiting just over the horizon. Everything is already committed, already stretched. Adler receives new orders that evening. Advance is postponed until further notice. Hold position. Conserve fuel. Engines often less absolutely necessary. The silence that follows is unsettling. Tanks that were meant to be constantly moving now sit cold and still, hulks of steel in a foreign landscape. Men clean weapons, write letters they are not sure will be sent, and stare eastward, where the campaign was supposed to end quickly. They are deep inside enemy territory, victorious in every battle that matters, yet increasingly alone. Speed carried them here. Now speed has outrun support. And for the first time, the possibility emerges that the campaign's greatest enemy is not the Red Army in front of them, but the empty roads behind them. The advance slows and the arithmetic turns brutal. July 24, 1941. Midday. West of the Dnieper River. The heat is oppressive, thick enough to make breathing feel like work. The road ahead slopes gently down toward the river, but the column has stopped again. Engines are silent. Men sit in the shade cast by their vehicles, canteens nearly empty, boots off, socks draped over hot metal to dry. This halt is not ordered because of enemy resistance. It is ordered because there is nothing left to burn. Fuel levels across the sector have fallen below what planners once considered a worst-case scenario. Units that should be operating with reserves for 3 days now measure supply in hours. Some in kilometers. The math that once looked so elegant on staff maps has collapsed under reality. At Army Group headquarters, supply officers run the numbers again and again. Each calculation produces the same result. The farther the front advances, the less fuel actually arrives. Trucks consume too much on the journey. Rail lines cannot be converted fast enough. Soviet locomotives are incompatible. Spare parts for captured engines do not exist. Every solution creates a new problem. Sending more trucks forward increases congestion and breakdowns. Concentrating fuel in larger dumps makes them easy targets. Slowing the advance conserves fuel but gives the enemy time to rebuild defenses. Speed or supply? There is no longer enough of both. General Field Marshal Fedor von Bock receives increasingly blunt reports. Divisions requesting permission to pause for maintenance. Panzer regiments reporting that fewer than half their vehicles are operational, not from combat losses, but from wear and empty tanks. Infantry commanders warning that men are collapsing from exhaustion on forced marches meant to compensate for the lack of transport. Hitler, far to the west, demands continued pressure. The enemy is nearly beaten, he insists. A final push will break them. But at the front, the push feels hollow. On July 26, a planned armored thrust is delayed when fuel trucks arrive carrying only a fraction of what was promised. Crews line up with jerrycans, waiting hours under the sun. Arguments break out. Officers intervene. The fuel is rationed by the leader, poured carefully through funnels lined with cloth to catch dirt. Some units receive nothing at all. They are ordered to wait. Waiting becomes the defining experience of the campaign. Waiting for fuel. Waiting for food. Waiting for spare parts that never arrive. Every pause allows Soviet engineers to blow another bridge, another culvert, another stretch of rail. German repair teams work constantly, but they cannot be everywhere. The Soviets are no longer retreating blindly. Outside a small town near the Dnieper, a German battalion advances cautiously and meets organized resistance. Artillery fire is accurate. Counterattacks are coordinated. The Red Army has learned where the German columns are weakest. They strike supply convoys at night, then melt away. A single destroyed fuel truck now has consequences far beyond its size. It might have been carrying the fuel needed to move a battalion the next day. Without it, the battalion stays put. Without the battalion, a neighboring unit is exposed. A small failure cascades outward. Major Hoffman writes again, this time with urgency bordering on desperation. Current supply throughput insufficient to sustain offensive operations. Recommend operational pause to rebuild logistics. The recommendation does not move upward. Instead, priorities shift. Fuel is redirected toward selected spearheads deemed critical. Other units are effectively written off as static. They hold ground, dig in, and wait for the system to catch up. But the system does not catch up. The roads degrade faster than they can be repaired. Vehicles that make the trip east cannot always make it back west. Horses die in harness from heat and lack of fodder. Replacements are scarce. Captured Soviet supplies help briefly, then run out. By the end of July, the character of the campaign has changed. It is no longer a sweeping, fluid movement. It is a series of jerks and stops, surges followed by exhaustion. The confidence of June feels distant, almost naive. Men still believe they are winning. But fewer believe it will be quick. The supply lines have not collapsed all at once. They are fraying strand by strand, under pressure that never relents. And with each frayed strand, the balance shifts slightly, quietly, away from the attackers. Momentum breaks and the enemy recovers. August 8, 1941. Early evening. Near the approaches to Kiev. The sky is bruised purple and red as the sun drops behind a line of trees shredded by artillery fire. German infantry dig shallow fighting positions in soil baked hard by weeks of heat. Their movements are slower now, deliberate, conserving energy. The sound of engines is rare. When a vehicle does pass, men look up automatically, counting it, judging whether it is moving forward or heading back empty. This is no longer an advance driven by motion. It is an advance constrained by scarcity. Orders arrive late and change often. One day a unit is told to prepare for an attack. The next day the order is cancelled due to fuel shortages. The day after, it is reinstated, but with reduced objectives. Officers learn to plan in fragments, knowing that no plan survives contact with the supply situation. Near Kiev, Panzer Group 1 has been tasked with a decisive maneuver to encircle Soviet forces. On paper, it is bold and elegant. In reality, it depends on fuel deliveries that are already behind schedule. Tank crews sleep beside their vehicles, waking at every sound. They know that if the order comes to move, it must be executed immediately, before another delay drains the last reserves. Jerrycans are hidden, guarded, sometimes stolen. Fuel becomes currency. Trust erodes. In one regiment, a company commander orders his men to drain fuel from disabled vehicles without authorization. It keeps his tanks moving for another day. When higher command discovers the action, the reprimand is brief and half-hearted. Everyone understands why he did it. The Red Army feels the shift. Soviet commanders, once reeling, now sense hesitation. German attacks lose their relentless timing. Pauses appear where none existed before. These pauses are exploited. Fresh units arrive. Defensive lines are reinforced. Artillery is dug in and camouflaged. Counterattacks are planned not to defeat German units outright, but to delay them. Delay is enough. A single day of delay forces German units to burn fuel idling. 2 days require resupply that may not come. 3 days can halt an entire operation. Near Cherkasy, a German motorized infantry battalion is ordered to support an armored thrust but cannot move. Their trucks are empty. The tanks advance without them and are forced to pull back after encountering stiff resistance. The failure is recorded as a tactical setback. The cause is logistical, and it is becoming routine. Air support, once decisive, is now unreliable. Luftwaffe units operate on strict fuel allocations. Pilots fly fewer sorties, choose targets carefully. Soviet aircraft, though still inferior, appear in growing numbers. Even limited harassment forces German columns to disperse, slowing movement further. Morale changes in subtle ways. Men still fight hard. Discipline holds. But the belief in inevitability fades. Conversations turn to winter, to distance, to how far they have come and how far they still must go. Letters home are less confident. Jokes are darker. Supply officers become some of the most important men in the army, and also the most hated. They carry bad news, enforce rationing, deny requests. Many sleep with pistols close at hand, not from fear of the enemy, but from the anger of their own troops. By mid-August, it is clear that the campaign has crossed a threshold. The German army is still advancing, still inflicting heavy losses, but it is no longer dictating the tempo everywhere. In key sectors, the Red Army is setting the pace by forcing the Germans to wait, to burn resources they cannot replace quickly. The supply lines, stretched beyond design, are now actively shaping operations. Commanders plan not around opportunity, but around fuel forecasts. When forecasts fail, plans fail with them. The short fight promised at the beginning has vanished. In its place is a grinding contest where every kilometer forward costs more than the last, and where the enemy grows stronger with every pause. The collapse has not been sudden. It has been gradual, cumulative, and irreversible. The quiet defeat before the obvious one. September 30, 1941. Dawn. The outskirts of Vyazma. Cold air settles into low ground as engines struggle to turn over. The first hints of autumn frost cling to grass flattened by months of traffic. Breath fogs in front of faces that were sweating in dust only weeks earlier. The season has changed, and the war has changed with it. German units assemble for what has been promised as the decisive effort. One final push. One last concentration of force to end the campaign before winter. Maps are unfolded once more, arrows drawn again, confident lines pointing east. But the ground reality tells a different story. Many vehicles do not start at all. Batteries are weak. Fuel is rationed so tightly that engines are warmed for minutes, not hours. Crews debate whether to move now or wait until absolutely necessary. Every decision is shaped by scarcity. The supply system is no longer strained. It is exhausted. Rail lines still lag far behind the front. Conversion teams work day and night, but the distance is too great. Trucks that survive the journey arrive battered and half empty. Replacement vehicles exist on paper, not on roads. Horses that once filled the gaps are dying in increasing numbers, unable to cope with cold, hunger, and overwork. Major Hoffman, thinner now, older in the face, writes his final entry for the month. Fuel deliveries inconsistent. Offensive sustainability doubtful. Winter equipment non-existent at forward dumps. He closes the ledger knowing the numbers will not change. At the front, men sense the truth without needing reports. They dig deeper positions. They collect firewood when they can. They barter with locals for food. Helmets are lined with cloth. Summer uniforms are worn under coats taken from abandoned Soviet stores. The war they expected to finish months ago is settling in for the long haul. When the offensive begins, it advances unevenly. Some spearheads surge forward briefly, fueled by carefully hoarded reserves. Others barely move at all. Gaps open not from enemy action, but from immobility. Soviet forces exploit these gaps, counterattacking where German units are weakest, where engines are cold and fuel tanks dry. The Red Army, battered but alive, now fights with growing confidence. They know the roads. They know the weather that is coming. And they know, perhaps better than their enemy, that time is now a weapon. Rain begins to fall in October. Roads dissolve into mud. Trucks sink to their axles. Fuel consumption spikes again, absurdly high, just to move a few hundred meters. Vehicles are abandoned where they stand, frozen into the landscape. The supply lines do not merely fail. They become irrelevant. Units at the front are forced to live off what they can carry and what they can take. The concept of a steady flow from the rear disappears. Each formation becomes an island, connected by radio but not by reliable movement. The short fight is over, not because of a single defeat, but because the foundation required to keep fighting fast and far has collapsed under its own weight. By the time winter closes in, the outcome is already decided in quiet ways. The German army will still fight. It will still kill and be killed. But it will no longer move as it once did. The war of motion has ended, replaced by a war of endurance it was never prepared to sustain. The collapse of the supply lines did not make headlines. It did not appear in victory bulletins or dramatic communiques. But it determined everything that followed. What began with confidence and speed ended with empty roads, silent engines, and men waiting in the cold for fuel that would never come.